Okay, these are the regular noodles after they've dried a little bit more. And here we go, noodles finished. Okay, so this is the finished dish. You have soaked grain, homemade noodles, soaked, so meaning that you're breaking down the bran so that it's more easily digestible in a softer noodle, more like noodles made just with flour that's already, like, not whole wheat but had the bran taken out. Semolina is not the whole wheat, so made with mostly durum, a little bit of kamut, and maybe a touch of Sonora wheat in it, but mostly durum. Soaked pasta noodles. First step, grind your wheat. So that's the first step. We have durum wheat, organic, straight from the farm. Organic durum wheat, and I mixed in a little bit of kamut, just for flavor. So durum with a little bit of kamut, and that's the first step. I'll let you know when it's done. Okay, so we're making whole grain pasta, but this is a soaked recipe. It's because when you do whole grains, the bran is a little bit too hard, and it's not as easy to digest according to a lot of the sources I've read. And so the purpose of a soaked grain is to eat away at the bran a little bit so it becomes more digestible, as well as, texture-wise, maybe a little bit more close to like a regular flour that has that taken out. So this is my mill. As you see, it's Nutri-Mill, and the settings, as I had said when it was on, the motor is on full blast, feed rate is as low as you can go. That way it gets a really fine, and of course if you want a very coarse flour for other things, you would of course have the motor as low as it can go and the feed rate as high as it can go. But in this case I wanted a very fine flour. Now, as I said earlier when the thing was on, don't touch. This is a mix between durum wheat, organic, got straight from the farm, and a little bit of kamut. Again, organic, and I got it straight from the farm. Mostly durum because pasta requires a high protein and a very dense type of wheat. And so this here is going to be good. It's a very dense, high protein wheat meant for pasta, not a light one as you would use for pastries. But this is a very dense, heavy one. And I'll get to the next step just a minute.
So it's also very easy because you have to drive all the way to the store actually to get it. But the wheat here, if you just make it, then it's faster and easier.
Yep. So, because literally all I have to do is reach into my wheat storage, get some wheat out, grind it, and there I go. It's really quick. I don't have to remember to keep flour on hand. I make flour to order, and really that's easiest. And it's good. Now, as you can see, I mentioned in another video, that is Himalayan salt. Saves you money, and it's really pretty. And that we can get in use as well. I'll go over that later. Don't touch. Okay. So, in this next step, you can do it by hand, or I have a dough hook and a KitchenAid. So this dough hook will save me a lot of time. Okay, this is, you can see the recipe on below in the description of the video, or on the website. Visit hosrit.com to see the recipe for this. Now, the important thing about measuring flour is that in this freshly ground stuff, you have to remember there's going to be a lot more air in it. There's a reason why in a lot of really professional recipes, they don't measure it by volume like in cups. They measure it by weight. So in freshly ground flour, there's actually less flour per cup than a cup of flour that's been sitting on the shelf for months because it's had time to settle and compact. This is a lot more air in it. So when you're measuring it, you need to measure a little extra in most cases with freshly ground flour, just simply because there's a lot of air in it. It just went through the mixer. So let's go ahead and measure 1 good cup of flour. You don't have to put in the dough hook yet. Just 1 big cup of flour, a little extra. We're going to put 3.5 cups of flour per serving, or per batch. Okay, that's good. That's good. Make a big heaping cup, a little extra. There you go. And we're going to have 3 of those. Well, 3.5 of those. You can do it by weight also. I don't really have the weight directions here, so just if it's fresh flour, it's just freshly ground, make a little extra. Put a little extra in. If it's been sitting in the shelf for a while and it's from the store, then go ahead and don't do the heaping cups like I'm showing you. Then yep, that's 3.5 cups per batch, and you can make a double batch if you want.
This much. Now it's time to add the water. Never use tap water while baking bread.
Yep, that's right. And while this isn't bread, this is pasta we're making. The reason why you never add tap water for when making any bread product is because it kills the yeast in it. Now,
and you cannot be strong enough to This is very thick dough, so you need a machine to help with it.
Yeah. If you have really strong hands, you may not, but it's a thick dough it makes, and you really need a machine. So, again, never use tap water when making bread products. Yes, you can get away with it in a pasta, but it defeats the whole purpose. We're making things low chemical, and water is one of the easiest ways to add the chemicals that are bad for you. Get a good tap water. I'm using distilled. Distilled is great for these purposes of low chemical recipes. And
just use the water that you buy from the store.
Yep, distilled, not in tap water. So we're going to make 1 cup of water per batch, and just put it right on in there, along with the rest of the ingredients for the soak that I'm going to show you. We're going to have also a little bit of vinegar. Just put in 1 cup of tap water, 2 tablespoons of vinegar. I think it's tablespoons, could be teaspoons. I have to look at my notes. It'll be on the page that you're looking at in the notes or in the website. But remember the vinegar and the not tap water, the bottled water. And just from that point, just knead until it's ready. I'll have the notes on the description and on hosrit.com. Here we go, we're adding the water.
It's vinegar time.
2 tablespoons.
2 tablespoons of vinegar.
Per batch, 2 tablespoons. Yep.
And it may be a little disgusting, but trust us, it will be some good stuff after.
Yeah, she doesn't really like vinegar except on potato chips. But even at that, you can't really taste it in the final thing. We're using organic vinegar.
And it's apple flavor.
Yep, organic apple vinegar, 2 tablespoons per batch. She doesn't really like the smell, but it's good stuff. It really is good stuff. And what again that does is that eats away at the bran overnight. So so it makes it easier to digest and easier to chew, more like regular pasta than whole wheat. Yep. And so you can also sometimes put a little bit like yogurt that have enzymes that that can eat away at that too, with lots of breads you make. In this case, it's up to you. I'm just going to do vinegar, but you can always experiment around it if you want. Lots of breads I do, little bits of yogurt as well. So it's up to you, but the vinegar will be good. It'll help eat away at the bran, make it a little bit more easy to digest, softer to eat. And there we go. Next step is to
We'll be with you on the next step. Bye. We just finished the dough. Now it's time to put some olive oil around the bowl.
And then leave it overnight. So as you can see, it's a really nice dense dough. Don't worry, we both washed our hands really well before this.
Yep.
And so I sometimes usually just give it a couple of kneads as well by hand, even though it's pretty hard to do. It's a nice dense dough. I mean, if you don't have hand problems, it's not. Don't put your face on it. Yep,
Pretty soft.
But as a big whole, it's interesting to knead it a bunch. That's why it helps to have a, Cuisinart. Yep. So we're just gonna put olive oil in the bowl, put that in, and let it sit at least overnight. Ideally, maybe 24 hours, because you want that bran to get dissolved enough.
And it's very good to like do anything with. Like if you want to roll it or if you want to do something with it, you can.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the dough has been sitting for 24 hours. It's had plenty of time to soak. Now it's time for either the rollout stage or the stage where if you want to turn it into egg noodles, you can. Now, just for the regular noodles, you just roll it out. If you want to turn this into egg noodles, that will require some flour that is not, you might have to potentially go to flour that's not freshly ground, just for the last step, to add a little bit of freshly ground, non-freshly ground one that has had the bran removed, if you really want to. I mean, you can always try really light flour like Sonora wheat or like soft white, maybe, if you're gonna not want too much heavy bran in it. But yeah, you can at this stage add egg, milk, a little extra flour to get more of an egg noodle if you want. But for our purposes, I'm just going to roll this out. I'll have some more information on the egg noodle conversion on the description or on my site, hosrit.com. For now, just roll this out. Now, this, you have to remember, when cooking, expands a bit. So thin. I'm not saying thin as a sheet of paper, but considering that I'm rolling this by hand, anytime I roll it by hand, I always have to make sure to err on the side of thin rather than thick, because it's easy to make it too thick. I mean, of course, maybe you don't want a sheet of paper or anything like that, but I mean, really, honestly, it's ridiculously hard to make a sheet of paper thin if you're doing it by hand. So, yeah, thin, it plumps up, and even your thin is going to probably be a bit thicker than what some people are used to. But it'll be good. It's real good stuff. I can't really hold the recording thing and make it, so I will roll it out and show you next step. Okay, so at this step, your choice. If you're doing it by hand, you can use a pizza cutter to roll out strips just like it is, or you can roll it up into a roll and just snip, 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 However you want to choose to do it, whichever is easier for you is the right way of doing it. Really, just pizza cutter up and down, or roll it up and cut, cut, cut. Once you do that, just dry the noodles a little bit before you cook them. It should, if you did it right, be really pretty easy to roll. A lot easier than maybe it would have been before you started soaking it, because with the bran broken down a bit more, it makes it a little easier to roll out. Okay, this is about a half batch. Now, noodles are a little on the thin side because the dough is just so easy to work with because of the soaked method I used. And it is a little fragile, but these, as long as your dough's not too fragile, that's going to work out well. You can maybe have it a little thicker than that. It just depends on your taste. The thinner you go, the more fragile it's going to be. Just be careful when boiling it. Make sure to dry it good before you boil it. But there it is. There's about a half batch right there.
Here's how to make some good bread. If you can see it in some previous videos, you can see how we made this big baby.
Yep. So this next step, as you can see, we have egg noodles. So, well, not quite yet, but what we did to turn the dough into egg noodle dough, as you could tell, I made a double batch when I did it, so that I would have one batch to make noodles with and one batch to make egg noodles with. So, yep, what I did is we added 1 cup of flour. Now, the type of flour, I used something a little bit lighter this time because it didn't have time to soak.
Like you saw in one of our other previous videos.
Yep. So
how we made the waffles.
Now, what I did here is, like I said, 1 lighter of flour, like a Sonora wheat, or maybe something lighter, or if you want a heavier flour, use something without the bran, because it's not going to have time to soak. One way or another, make sure it's organic. Hopefully something from a farm if you can, but either way, organic, because flour, if it's not organic, can have a lot of glyphosate in it.
And
so,
make sure you have flour on your hands and the board before you roll it, because this dough is sticky.
yeah, it's a little more sticky than the regular dough. So what we're going to do is add 1 cup of flour, at least, you may need more, but 1 cup of flour to start with, 2 eggs, and a little bit of butter. Now, if you need to hydrate, use milk, because this really should have some milk in the egg recipe. If you want to get all fancy, you can potentially use a little bit of powdered milk to turn the existing, the liquid that's in there into milk. Now, that's something that's very doable if you want to, get all interesting with it. Or you could just add a tiny bit more flour and a little touch of milk to just do it. Now, one of the things I did not add salt. The reason why I did not add salt to this mix is...
And before you eat it, it really doesn't taste good without salt.
Yeah, you'll need to add salt. So
Have to add salt.
Yes. One of the reasons why is because the salt I use is the Himalayan salt, and it's a little bit more coarse than regular salt, and that can get in here and cut a little bit of the dough. It's best to make sure you add it to the water. It will saturate this thoroughly, but don't skip the salt. Just add it to the water instead of the dough. That'll make it a little easier to work with the dough without the coarse grains cutting the dough here. So we mixed it all in. I put 2 eggs, a little bit of butter, and you might have to add a little extra water depending on how not water, a little extra flour, or maybe if you need to hydrate, use some milk.
And see, I just touched it and it didn't get stick to my hands.
Yep. So it's going to be a little more sticky, but not hopefully too sticky. It won't hopefully stick to the board of the hands. A little harder to work with, but it'll have the egg flavor. If you add any milk or powdered milk, it'll have like a little of that flavor, maybe a little butter in it. So it'll have some good added different flavor to that. A little hard to work with, maybe worth it for you, maybe some extra drying time. But let this sit for 10 minutes before you do anything to it. Okay, these are the regular noodles after they've dried a little bit more. And these are the egg noodles once they have not dried at all. I mean, they're still just barely rolled out. So I made these a little wider, roughly the same thickness, but a little wider on the egg noodles. And they haven't dried out yet. These have pretty well dried a bit. I will show you what it looks like after they're boiled. Okay, this is what the egg noodles look like once they're dry. As you can see,
We used this.
they look decent.
We used this, some flour, and you may have saw some yesterday in one of our other previous videos.
There they are. Show you after they get cooked. Okay, next step in the noodles is boiling them. I have some water. Don't skimp on the water. Make sure that you have plenty of water, and that I'm going to add a little bit more, and that it's bottled water, like distilled. I get distilled. The whole gallon is like 88 cents. Really cheap. Do not put tap water. That's one of the biggest ways you're going to get chemicals in here that are not good. So we need water, plus we need salt. We're going to use Himalayan salt or real salt, one of the two, whichever you could get cheaper. Do not get stuff with anti-caking agents or stuff that's getting bleached, if at all possible. No, on our pasta, here's the pasta after it's been good and dried, so it's nice, decently thin. You could shape it however you feel like it. Some people do little fun shapes with cookie cutters, but however you do your pasta, there it is. Put your salt in the water because we did not put it in the pasta intentionally. We're going to put it in here. Make sure that it's very crucial. Don't skip the salt, and make sure it's a good salt. We're going to put it right there. If you want to, you can also put some trace minerals in the water as well. There's some liquid trace minerals you can get from vitamin companies. That's a little secret where you can sneak some trace minerals into some food, especially for kids who don't like taking it. But that's one of the things. I know you throw a lot of the water away, but if you get some cheap trace minerals, that can help if you want. Otherwise, just the salt. Important. You can put a little olive oil in the water too if you want. That can help a little. Well, we're going to put that in and boil it and get our noodles ready. Okay, so now it's in the water. There is no boiling time that I can give you because it depends on the thickness of the noodles. It depends on how dry the noodles are. It depends on a number of factors. 3 to 5 minute time is not unreasonable for some. It can take 8 minutes, 9 minutes for others. I mean, these can get to be pretty thick noodles, so really the only way you're going to know is just to take one out and to try it. Give it at least 3 minutes. Past that, you really just gotta look. Once you get in the hang of making them all the same size, same type, as you do it regularly, you'll get to know exactly how long to do it. But it just has too many variations on this. I live in a dry place. That's going to take a little bit longer because my noodles dry out a lot better than, say, if you were living back east. So just eyeball it, take them out when they're ready. You can know when they're ready by trying it. At least 3 minutes. Some cases up to 8-9 minutes. Somewhere in there is most likely what you're going to see. And here we go. Noodles finished. They taste pretty good, actually. Once we put the sauce on them, then they'll be ready to eat. Okay, so this is the finished dish. You have soaked grain, homemade noodles, soaked, so meaning that you're breaking down the bran so that it's more easily digestible in a softer noodle, more like noodles made just with flour that's already, like, not whole wheat, but had the bran taken out. Semolina is not the whole wheat, so made with mostly durum, a little bit of kamut, and maybe a touch of Sonora wheat in it, but mostly durum, organic, straight from the farm. And then Alfredo sauce made from scratch to get as few chemicals in it as possible. So you're going to have tons less glyphosate because it's organic, straight from the farm, less pesticides, less chemicals, no added artificial anything, and if you choose your ingredients carefully, you can drastically reduce the amount of chemicals in here. That's it.